Today we're going to be talking about campground etiquette, and you might notice right away in this video that I'm talking lower than I normally do, and that's because I'm in a campground right now and I'm trying to be respectful of the other guests, my neighbors here at the campground. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to walk through 8 different mistakes or rules broken that I've personally seen on camping trips, and we're going to go through them so that you can avoid making these same mistakes and you can be respectful to your neighbors when you're camping. So let's jump in with number 1. Right off the bat, let's start with one that is one of the most common things that you'll see almost every time you go to a busy campground, and that is people cutting through campsites as a shortcut. This is something that I've seen many times, and I admit I've even done it myself. And so it's something that is easy to kind of feel like, oh, I want to take a shortcut and get to my campsite faster. But this can be disruptive or disrespectful to other guests. So it's something that you want to pay attention to if you are camping. Just take the long way around and be respectful of the boundaries of other people's campsites. And another thing I'll tag on to this one is just to generally respect the boundaries of a campsite. If you're setting up your camp and you have a lot of furniture or tents or things that you want to set up, just make sure that you're not spilling over into somebody else's campsite area, because that can be really annoying. So imagine you arrive and some of your campsite's already taken up by somebody else's gear. That can be really irritating. So don't do that to other people. Etiquette mistake number 2 is arriving after dark. Now, as you can imagine, when you're camping, oftentimes, especially if you're tent camping, you're not really shielded from noise and light like you would be in your own home. And so when somebody drives into the campsite and they have the headlights on, that can really flood an area with a lot of light. And when you're opening and closing car doors, that can also be really disruptive and can wake people up or just be annoying when people are trying to have a nice, peaceful, relaxing evening. So don't do that. Make sure you give yourself plenty of time to arrive at the campsite before it's dark, and definitely before the campsite's quiet hours, which are usually posted and you can find online. So that might also be good to just know what the quiet hours at the campground you're going to are. And another one we've got to talk about is, of course, littering. Now, this is something that maybe goes without saying, but you would be amazed at how much trash you'll find at a campground. Even a classic one is people try to burn trash or even like throw cans into the fire circle, which is really irritating because whenever somebody comes after you, they're going to find that trash there and they're going to have to pick up after you so that they can start their own campfire. So whatever you're doing, just make sure that you're picking up your trash, and what you really want to do is leave the campsite in better shape than when you got there. So even cleaning up some other people's trash that was there beforehand can be really nice. So don't be the type of person that leaves more trash at the campsite than when you got there. And etiquette mistake number 4 is just being noisy. You would be amazed at how many times I've seen people just playing loud music or just talking really loud late into the night, like 2, 3 a.m. And of course, a lot of people go camping because they want to get away from the noise and they want to go have some peace and quiet and relaxation. And so going and finding a campground that's just as noisy, if not more noisy than it was at home, can be really discombobulating and really irritating, and you don't want to be the type of person that gives someone else that experience. So just don't be noisy, be respectful, be quiet, and we'll all be happy at the campground. Number 5 is being disrespectful with shared areas. So for example, some campgrounds will have a shower house or bathroom facilities, and you just want to make sure that when you're using them that you're being really respectful of other people and considerate of what they're going to want or need at those facilities as well. For example, don't be the type of person that hogs the shower stall and uses all the hot water. When some campsites get really busy, there's a limited number of shower stalls and some people are going to want to use those, and you don't want to be the person that kind of holds up the line, right? So that's one example. Another thing is just like leaving stuff in the bathrooms. That can be annoying, or just generally putting things in a mess or disarray. So you want to clean up after yourself, be respectful, and the golden rule kind of applies here. Leave the space how you would want it to be left for yourself. And so just be respectful of shared facilities, and that's going to go a long way. Another one is running a loud generator late into the night or all night long. And this is something that is kind of related to the noise thing, but I've actually been camping before where somebody right next to me was just running this really loud generator like all night long. And it made it really hard to sleep, and it just was very disruptive to my experience trying to be in the peace and quiet of outdoors. And there was just this big machine running right next to me. And so if you use a generator for camping, or maybe you have one that goes with your RV, just keep the other people in the campsite in mind and try to turn it off as much as you can, or even think about if you can avoid using it at all, depending on the circumstances. So be considerate of other people when you start using a generator. Number 7 is a big one, and this is feeding wild animals or leaving out food. And this is bad for a number of reasons. First of all, if you leave out food, it can attract wild animals, and wild animals can, of course, be dangerous, like a bear, for instance, or they can also be carrying a lot of diseases. For example, raccoons are one that's famous for carrying a lot of diseases, and you wouldn't want to attract that to your campsite. So it's important that you, number one, don't leave food out. A good way to avoid this is just to take all of your food and food-related gear and pack it up in your car before you go to bed. That way it's sealed away and it's not going to kind of be letting off scents for the animals to smell and be attracted to. And number two, you just want to, if the temptation strikes, avoid the temptation or sort of turn away the temptation of actually feeding animals. This, of course, can be bad for you, but it can also be bad for the animal, because if you're leaving out food or giving them food in some way, this can train them to come back to the campground in order to get food when they really should be getting food from sort of their natural ways, right? And so just don't do this. It can be really bad for you and for the wildlife. Last but not least is smoking out your neighbors. In other words, building a campfire that produces an excessive amount of smoke. And there's a couple of ways that this can happen. Number one, you could be using a lot of leaves or pine needles in your fire, which can produce a lot of smoke if you're doing that. And another thing is that if you're using wet or unseasoned firewood, that tends to produce a lot more smoke than firewood that is dry or properly seasoned. And so that's something to keep in mind as well. If you're buying firewood from the campground itself or from a local store that sells firewood specifically for camping, then there's a pretty good chance that the firewood is going to be dry and ready to go. But that is something to keep in mind. So with that, that's going to be the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Subscribe for more like this. Bye now.